This month sucked. Man, I'm so glad it's February. Been a great February through 2 days so far. All right, Punxsutawney Phil, let's see what and hear how it sounded this morning out in Pennsylvania. Roll the tape.
But what this weather did not provide is a shadow or reason to hide. Glad tidings on this Groundhog Day. An early spring is on the way.
Oh, man, the place is going nuts.
And he only does not see his shadow about 2 out of every 10 times.
Is that right?
Yeah. So early spring doesn't happen often.
Now, I want to know his accuracy rate. Someone's got to look that up, too.
I think I read it was about 29%.
So he's like your local weatherman. No offense, Greg Bennett.
Yeah.
He's like the local weatherman. That's the best I can do. Okay. All right, 29%. So, I mean, yeah, I don't know. If he was a baseball player, that'd be pretty good. Batting .290. But when it comes to the weather, I'm not in love with Punxsutawney Phil's odds, but I'll take it. Whatever. Something to get me through a Friday in February. No Chiefs on Sunday. Got to wait another 9 days for that Super Bowl 58. Now, the beef in Jackson County, if you have not been following this, and I wouldn't expect you to, not that, you don't care, but it's a little inside baseball, but it matters. If you're a Jackson County resident and you've been dealing with the nonsense and the BS in that county over the last bunch of months, this matters when it comes to the future of the county and who's leading the county and who's got control of the county legislature on things like property taxes and Chiefs and Royals and things of that nature. Tony's Kansas City had this lengthy post yesterday that was very well done. And it talks about how Gwen Grant demands dismissal of Jackson County Democrats, notably Megan Marshall. Now, Gwen Grant is the president and CEO of the Urban League of Kansas City. She holds a lot of power and a lot of sway when it comes to what goes on and who gets elected in and around the urban core of Kansas City. She is a grifter. There is no denying that. But she has an incredible amount of power in parts of this community. So she put out a statement here that basically admonishes Democrats on the Jackson County legislature, Megan Marshall, Jalen Anderson, and Charlie Franklin. Why? Because they voted against a fellow Democrat, Donna Payton, and instead decided to make Jeannie Lauer the chair of the Jackson County legislature. Now, Jeannie Lauer is a Republican. Donna Payton is a Democrat. And these Democrats on the Jackson County legislature, Megan Marshall, Jalen Anderson, and Charlie Franklin, voted to make Jeannie Lauer, a Republican, the chair of the legislature. Megan Marshall became the vice chair. So in this letter, the statement that was put out by Gwen Grant, she said, quote, "It is time for us to stop being hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, and run amok by duplicitous, ambitious politicians who place their personal vendettas above the best interests of our community." It's awfully rich for Gwen Grant to lecture anybody on being hoodwinked and bamboozled and led astray and run amok. Because that's how she's made a living in this town, is hoodwinking people, bamboozling people, and leading them astray. She writes here, "When they deceive us, we must hold them accountable. Jalen, Megan, and Charlie betrayed the Democratic Party and slapped the black community in the face when they, for reasons based solely on petty political retribution, failed to see the bigger and more important picture. She says that they should be discharged from the Democratic Party. She said had they opted to vote on the right side of history, they would have voted for Donna Payton to become the first black woman to chair the Jackson County legislature." Gwen Grant writes she is competent and capable of leading the Jackson County legislature, and she is committed to advancing the principles of good government, economic mobility, equity, and inclusion. Maybe these three Democrats, and by the way, Megan Marshall's been on this show. She's very bright. I'm sure that her and I disagree on plenty on how we see the world and national politics. I don't really care what letter is next to her name, and neither should you. Because what ultimately matters is that she is an independent thinker. And as a black woman, she did not do what Gwen Grant of the Urban League wanted her to do. That is very rare in this town. And no matter how you look at that, no matter what you think of Meghan Markle, that is to be applauded. When any politician on the right or the left, in local politics or national politics, is willing to think for themselves and not be a sheep, and by the way, there are plenty of sheep on the right and the left, and they're willing to have an opinion or make a vote that is somewhat controversial against their base, even if it's disagreed upon by many, even if I disagree with it, if they actually have substance behind their reasoning, and Meghan Markle has, we've had her on the show to talk about it, I'll respect it. And she talked about how she thought it was important. She said on this show how she thought it was important for Jackson County to come off appearing bipartisan. And having Jeannie Lauer, a Republican, as the chair of the Jackson County legislature, and having herself, a Democrat, as the vice chair, makes the perception, whether or not it becomes reality remains to be seen, but at least starts off the legislative session with a perception that Jackson County and the legislature in particular is willing to work across some political lines. That's good if you're a Jackson County resident. That's what you should want. And the fact that Gwen Grant is all bent out of shape about it is also a good thing if you're just kind of a run-of-the-mill Jackson County resident who's ticked off with your property tax situation, who feels like the county has been wildly incompetent on things like taxes and crime for far too long. You should feel, and you haven't had many reasons to feel this way for a long time, but you should at least feel in a part of you that things might be starting to correct themselves. I'm not predicting utopia for Jackson County anytime soon. I promise you that. We are a long ways away from that happening in this county. However, if this is a small step in the right direction, when Gwen Grant, of all people, is unloading on fellow Democrats in Jackson County who are really just trying to work together with their colleagues with the letter next to their name be damned, I think we should be applauding that. And if Gwen Grant's sending out nasty letters and nasty memos about how she disagrees with votes of people like Meghan Markle, then, even better. And Meghan Markle did briefly respond to this, and she said, quote, "My journey in the United States Marine Corps, spanning 2 decades, instilled in me the importance of service, collaboration, and a commitment to the common good." She says, "My role as a legislator is not to agree with members of the governing body solely based on shared racial identity or political party, but to collaborate with all members for the greater good of the county." How about that? What a great statement by Meghan Markle. My role as a legislator is not to agree with members of the governing body based solely on shared racial identity or political party, but to collaborate with all members for the greater good of the county. Imagine if more people in local and national politics had that approach. It's also why we need way more veterans back in politics. They used to be a very large percentage of Congress, and now it's like 5% of Congress served. But when you have that background, and I admittedly don't, but when you do, you're able to strip down the nonsense of partisanship and actually accomplish things on behalf of your constituents. And now, we get grifters, attorneys, and people looking for retirement gigs in politics. And this is what we end up with, a failed system that's failing more every day. So just a little bright spot for you on a Friday if you're a Jackson County resident.